Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Supernatural Substation, your last stop before the unknown. I'm your host, Aline Pastanio, and my co host, Bernadine Richardson, will be joining me soon with tonight's guest, Sonia Brosz. Sonia is a Catholic mystic with the spiritual gift of discernment of spirits. She was called to become a religious charismatic in her 20s and has devoted her life to deliverance-based healing and spiritual warfare with the help and guidance of the Holy Spirit. Sonia has been working through ministerial referral for more than 30 years, and she is one of a rare group of people recognized as mystics by the Roman Catholic Church. Sonia is also the author of The Curse of El Diablo: Sorcery, Miracles, and Black Magic in Northern Mexico, in which she details her efforts to free a family from the evil magic of the Brujaria, and her confrontation with the devil himself. It is the frighteningly true story of an epic battle between the forces of good and evil and the triumph of faith over darkness. It's going to be an amazing show tonight, so please stay with us. We'll be right back with our guest after this short break. Welcome back to the Supernatural Substation, everyone. I'm Aline Pastanio, and my co host, Bernadine Richardson, is with me. Hey, Bernadine.
Hey,
Hey,
hope
welcome.
everybody's doing great.
Me too. I hope so. Everybody's going to be doing great after they listen to this.
Yes.
After that, they might have need of stuff. No, they may be scared because this might be a little scary, y'all. And so, on that note, I'm going to bring in our guest, Sonia Brosz, and she is a Catholic mystic. And tonight we're going to be talking about Bruja. She's going to correct me again, but dark Mexican magic. Let's just put it like that. And Santa Muerte and some other stuff. So, Sonia, thank you for coming on.
Hi, Adelina. You're welcome.
Thanks for coming back too,
Thank you.
because we had you a couple of years ago. I remember.
Yeah, that was about maybe 6-7 years ago.
Yeah, it was. Can you believe it?
No.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't believe time's going as fast as it's going. There's no way. Well, you told us in that episode, I think we talked a lot about what went on in your book, the Curse of El Diablo, and the whole event, all the events leading up to that. But we wanted to catch up with you and see see what's happened, what's changed. But for new listeners, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? You're a Catholic mystic, and can you tell us a little bit about what that is and how you get recognized by the Catholic Church to be a mystic?
Yeah, that's they didn't classify me as that until not just recently, a few years ago. But I started out in demonology, and I was pretty young. I was about 22, and just I grew up in North Dakota. I didn't know anything about the New Age really or anything like that. I graduated in '66, so I'm 75 now, and I'm retired.
Mm-hmm.
So, it was, when I first started out, I had no guidebooks to go by. I simply started out because I was really born with many gifts that, matured over time. And there's been one person in my family in each generation that inherits these gifts, and they're all from God. Everything is from God. So even as a little girl, I used to walk up to people and tell them things, you know, and if they were uh, hurting or they had a problem or something, um, I'd go over there and pat their knee if their knee was sore, and I'd be walking up and down the church aisles, and my mother would be having just a fit. She would she'd be like, "Get back here and sit down," before the church started.
Mhm.
And so anyway, I would be walking up and down and I would do healing and things like that with people. I didn't even know what I was doing. I had no idea whatsoever. And so as I got older, um, I just was always dedicated to God. My first memory at 2 years old was of God. I was maybe a year and a half, and I was looking up at the ceiling and listening to my parents. They were practicing hymns and things. My mother was a pianist and she played for the church, and they used to have a quartet and they'd practice hymns for church on a Saturday night. So I was laying there in my crib in my parents' room and looked up at the ceiling and I saw this light right between the ceiling and the wall. It was right on that whole little area there. And I just knew it was God and I just went back to sleep. I was happy. I just went back to sleep. And so it's been a lifelong relationship with God for me. Um I wouldn't say that I'm overly religious as far as religion is concerned, but I have a very deep spiritual connection with God.
Mhm.
So I've gone to many different churches. I've worked with many different churches and many different ministers, and then of course priests, of course, and then just whoever needed my help. Um, so for a while when I was first growing up, I grew up in a haunted house, so I kind of learned how to fight these things, whether they were. At that time I didn't know what they were. I didn't know if they were ghosts or whatever, but whatever we had in our house wasn't harmful. It just made a lot of noise walking up and down stairs and things like that. But as I got older, I got kind of tired of that. So I asked God to teach me how to quiet them down or, get rid of them or whatever. But
Mhm.
it took quite a few years and a lot of study to be able to learn. Um, you know, when I first began, I was the only, I guess you'd say, demonologist in the Midwest that I know of. I hadn't even heard of the Warners, at that point. Um, so I didn't know there was anybody else in the country doing this.
Mhm.
And so Ed and Lorraine Warren, I didn't know about them until I was in my 20s, almost 30, and I read one of Ed's books. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, there's somebody else out there doing this." And then, they had a relationship with Father Martin, so I wrote to Father Martin because the problem for me was that, none of the Protestant ministers wanted to talk about the devil at all, except for the Pentecostals. And even in the Catholic Church, um, if I walked in and wanted to talk to one of the priests about it, he would just hand me my hat and I'd be out the door. We're not gonna discuss that. We're not gonna talk about that type of thing. And they would just, usher me out the door.
Mhm.
Yeah, so it took quite a few years of really hard work and study. When I got into college, I started to read a lot of books on the metaphysical. Um, and I wasn't really interested in pursuing the metaphysical. I was more interested in how that related to what God wanted.
Mhm.
So sometimes I'd just read a paragraph or two in a book and put it away and find something else, to go to.
Mhm.
But it was a kind of a lifelong study, lifelong thing. Of course, in the meantime, I was going to school and working other jobs and everything else, and even got married and had children, 2 children. And so, it all of this kind of merged together throughout my life, and there was a time where I just literally felt kind of schizoid. I felt like I was half of me was like in the logical world. I kind of like science and math and all that stuff. And then the other half of me was in the spiritual world. So, I used to try to get those two to gel together, and that took quite a while. And actually took a little therapy too because it was pretty difficult to do. But over time, things finally settled down, and I finally got in a niche and was able to move forward. But I was very, very private. Um, law enforcement used to call me once in a while because they would they would be having a case that was tough, and one of the priests would had given my phone number or whatever. So I used to help out once in a while when they would be in. They would find signs of a ritual or signs of a ritual killing or whatever, and they would call me because the priest would tell them. They'd say, "Just call her and ask her, and if God wants to tell you what's going on, He will."
Mm.
So, I kind of started out pretty early with that, um, and it went on till just about 3, 4 years ago, really. So I just the reason I retired is because my husband is 100% disabled, Vietnam veteran,
Mm.
and I had to take care of him. So I had been counseling people on the phone for many years and sending them out exercise salt and oil and water and things like that, rosaries, blessed rosaries, breath things. And I would just send all that stuff out for free, just cost of shipping. But, it's just, I just, trying to take care of my husband, and he had a lot of strokes, TMI strokes, and, a lot of different problems. And he was really healthy up until about 2018, and he
Mhm.
had a serious back injury, and he had to have surgery. And he was under for 5 hours, and he had a stroke coming out of that.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so he used to drive a gas tanker,
Mm.
and all of a sudden he just couldn't work. And I had had cancer 3 times when I was younger, and I also had a lot of adhesion problems and stuff because my children were both cesarean section. So it was really hard for me to work because I
Mhm.
had a lot of, just a lot of problems with things. But but when he one day he just came to me, and it was July 30th of 2018, and he said, "I can't work anymore."
Mm.
And bless his heart, we've been married 45 years, and he had worked constantly from the time we met, and helped me with my boys, helped me raise my boys. They were from a previous marriage. Um, and he was just an absolute sweetheart. He's just been my rock for years.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, you know, but yeah, that's kind of the history of that. I just I was just born into it, and honestly, I never really felt like I had a choice, but at the same time, I never really wanted to choose anything else. It
Mhm.
was it just was what I wanted to do.
Yeah, yeah, it was your calling that you were doing. Well, I wanna just back up a little bit because when you were talking about the Warrens, you were talking about Father Martin, and, I was wondering, you said you contacted him. So what was that about, or what was that exchange like? Did you just wanna learn more, or what was that about reaching out to him? I know you were still young when you did it, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, it was about 40, 45 years ago.
Mhm.
And I reached out to him because, as far as I knew at the time, he was the only Catholic exorcist I had heard mentioned,
Oh,
by
okay.
name.
Mhm.
So I wrote to him and I said, I told him what I did and everything, and I asked him if he had any advice for me. And he just told me, he said, "Be careful what you're doing and make sure that you follow God's every guideline so that he can protect you." And
Mhm.
he told me, to make sure I always wore a blessed rosary when I was working and, how to protect myself. And he did tell me about exorcised oil and water and salt.
Mhm.
Um, so, but the problem was I had no priests around here that are around anywhere around the Midwest that would exorcise oil and water and salt for me.
Mm.
They, they just didn't want, they, they didn't have copies of the Book of Exorcism.
Mhm.
And I know that bishops were able to exorcise people, but none of them ever would even talk to me. You know,
Yeah. Yeah,
I
that
wasn't. Yeah,
go
I
ahead,
wasn't. I wasn't raised a Catholic. I was raised a Lutheran.
Mhm.
So, but from the time I was 5 years old, um, I went to the Catholic church with this friend of mine and her parents. My mother was in the hospital having my little sister, and they were Catholic, and we went to St. Patrick's. And while I was in there, and this is the first time I'd ever been in a Catholic church, I was looking up at the statue of Mary, and I had never even seen a statue before. Okay,
Mhm.
and all of a sudden, she turned and smiled at me, and then turned back, and so I, 5 years old, and I was just enamored. I
Mhm.
was, I just was like, I knew it was godly. I knew that it came from God. I knew that, it was love and everything. And so, yeah, I just, at that point in time, my whole self became Catholic. Even though I couldn't go to the Catholic Church until I got much older and I was able to choose and stuff for myself, which church I was going to go to.
Uh-huh.
But, you know, but even when I was just in high school, if we went to a country church, Lutheran church, and if the minister wasn't going to be there for some reason or the weather was bad or whatever, sometimes they'd have members of the Luther League step up and give the sermon. And they used to ask me to give the sermon. So I would, the minister couldn't come, so we would just, mom would play the piano for hymns, and you know, um, we just kind of get through it, ourselves because everybody was there. So, and I would give these sermons. I would go down the night before, and we only lived like a quarter of a mile away. But
Mhm.
I would go down the night before, and I would just look through the Bible, and God would tell me which verses He wanted me to use, and I'd put a ribbon in each one. And then the next day, I mean, I didn't write down the sermon. I had no idea what I was going to say. And
Mhm.
I would just read this verse, and then these words would just, all this would just come right out of my mouth. And I'd get done, and everybody'd go, "Oh, that was a beautiful Thanksgiving sermon. It was gorgeous." And I had no idea what I said. I had no
Yeah.
idea. No.
Yeah.
And I'd ask my mom, I'd say, "What did I say?" You know, she said, "Well, it was really eloquent. It was beautiful." And I'm like, "Well, that's great, but what did I say?"
Yeah.
I had
That's
no idea. Yeah.
that's like almost mediumistic, but like you open yourself up, or God opened you up, and
Right.
you do
Right.
right. Right.
Yeah. It had nothing to do with being a medium, I can tell you
Right.
that, because,
Mhm.
when I was little, um, I could, if I was around a graveyard or something or whatever,
Mhm.
I could actually hear the people that were talking or whatever. And I told God, I said, just, please stop this. I
Yeah.
don't want to hear these people talking. There's nothing I can do to help them. And just, please stop this. So he did. He just shut it off. And I was about 10 years old.
Yeah.
Um, so after that, I had no desire to even pursue anything like that.
Yeah.
Um,
It takes a special kind of person to do that. I don't think I could either. Even I mean, I'm not a medium, but I don't think I could handle that. Uh,
no, I didn't like it.
mhm.
No,
Yeah.
I felt
Well,
I felt violated, actually.
yeah,
You know,
because they learn all sorts of techniques to keep them away and everything. But I'm with you. I wouldn't want to be open to all of that.
no, no,
Yeah. It,
no, because they'd call me by name. I'd be sound
mhm.
asleep and they'd call my name and stuff. And the thing about it is, um, the the one thing about it, I think that God was really careful with me about was the fact that He didn't. If there was anything demonic, um, I would literally know it, and I would stop the dream. I could literally stop the dream and wake up, you know,
Mhm.
and then I would ask God to bind it up, and He would, and I'd go back to sleep.
Mhm.
So later on, when I was older, I learned how to bind them up in Latin.
Mhm.
I mean, I really could. I could, you know. So, yeah, it was just kind of a really weird, interesting childhood.
It
But
sounds like it. So, how did we get how did we get to be a demonologist? I mean, focused on that particular, let's call it branch of occultism or the supernatural. How did you find out, and was it just something that was given you basically by God, or what
yeah,
brought you? What became? How did you become a demonologist and decide? Make the decision to stick with that.
well, because I started to notice as I was getting older, um, I could tell when there were demons around people. I could see them with my mind. Thank God, not with my eyes, but I could see them with my mind.
Mhm.
And I did not like them. I was very angry. I mean, I just totally belonged to Jesus Christ. I had nothing, I didn't want anything to do with the devil or any of his minions.
Mhm.
Um, you know, and the interesting thing is the fact that up until the time that I was in my mid 20s and I went to a Pentecostal church and I received the baptism of the Holy Spirit, I never realized what a demon even really was, except that I knew that he was evil, he was bad, and um, I didn't want anything to do with him. So anytime that I got around places and felt anything demonic at all, I would immediately pray silently to for God to bind them up and to just keep them in thrall until I left or whatever, and
Mhm.
not to let them attack the people that they were attacking. So it was kind of a God taught thing, really, when I first
Mhm.
started. So I really didn't know anything. And then once I went to that church, the minister was honestly a very excellent man. He was really humble and he was an excellent exorcist. Um, and after I got even before I got the baptism of the Holy Spirit, he talked to me and he told me, he said, you know, I just see you. You're always you. I see that you are really a fighter.
Mhm.
Um, against demons. And I told him, I said, the thing is, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to do this. I'm just doing what I feel is right to do. And so he really did help me a lot because he gave me some prayers to use. He taught me how to tell the difference between things and how to um, use the gifts that God had given me. So, you know, after the baptism of the Holy Spirit, a lot of those gifts really began to strengthen. My power of discernment. My knowledge, wisdom, all of this stuff. I mean, interpretation, different, many different gifts. And so I really I really enjoyed being around him and him helping me, and I used to go over and visit with him and his wife, and they were just the most lovely people. And they were in Dickinson, North Dakota.
Mhm.
So that's really he's the one who really gave me a foothold and some solidarity underneath my feet. And then as I went forward, then more ministers and more priests started to open up to working with me.
Mm.
Um, mm. It's just like I said, I was reading all kinds of books and trying to figure out what was what and what was going on, and you know, so and then there were people that would try to convince me that I was psychic, and I'd tell them, no, I'm not psychic. I
Mhm.
really am not. Um, and you know, and I just tell them, I'd say, don't lose your car keys. Don't call me if you lose your car keys. I have no clue where your car keys are. And don't call me for other psychic things either. Don't ask me about who you're going to marry or what your boyfriend's name is or anything like that. I'm not. I, c- you know, anything I'm going to tell you could be completely wrong or completely, inaccurate or even just 50-50. I mean, it would be based on like regular human analysis.
Mhm.
Um, but whenever God would inspire me, then it was always 100% correct. Everything he would say was 100% correct. So
That's yeah,
yeah,
and
and
I
that's
the difference. Mhm.
well, that's what the church, only recognizes something like that. If you're not 100% correct, then basically you're just like a psychic wannabe or a mystic wannabe or whatever. But
Mhm.
you know, whenever God comes through, it's always 100% correct.
Mhm. Now, it's sort of like people who get into witchcraft and the occult, and once they start on that path, then they they begin to attract, uh, how do I want to say it? They begin to attract situations that in which they want to like sort of exercise their powers, quote unquote, which is not their powers. So once
Mhm.
you begin, and this is why I'm saying it, once you begin focusing on uh, dealing with demons, you have put yourself on a path, and I guess basically you became visible to them, sort of, and that kind of led you into the type of magic and rituals that are dark and that we're going to talk about with the Brujaria and Santa Muerte and the quote unquote cartel magic, right? So once the demons knew they had an adversary, um,
That's correct.
yeah,
Yeah.
then they began to say, "Okay, show us, or we'll show you, and then you show us." And so that's how it happened, I guess. I mean, because you got drawn into some really dark, confronted with some really dark stuff that other people just like. I want nothing to do with that kind of magic.
I
No,
needed to lie.
wait, what?
Neither do I, Arlene.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. See, it's like once you say, then somebody, I'm or like, I'm a witch, and people start going around, I'm a witch. Well, eventually they're going to find somebody who's going to say, oh, yeah. And, they'll start flexing their muscles. But obviously, these are unseen things, but they're like, okay, so now we have a new challenge. Try and break you and try and scare you. And so,
Yeah.
how about that dark path? That you were walking on there. And not you doing anything dark, but how did you get drawn into that? And I know you've come out on the other side of it, but tell us. A lot of people don't know about the rituals and the magic, especially in the Santa Muerte cult, but also in Palo Mayombe, and the
Oh, yeah.
Brujaria magic, and they don't really know
No.
about it, and they only see like a top level, because I hear a lot of people who are enamored with, especially with Santa Muerte, the saint of death, but I don't think they really know the significance behind it. So maybe you can shed some light on that and tell us some of the experiences, how you basically begin to have to focus on that, because I guess that's where the path went.
Well, it started, for many years I had been, helping people and healing people and, helping them escape oppression whenever possible. You can't always help everybody.
Mhm.
There's sometimes where people people suffer for whatever reason God designs or not. Well, I mean, however it is. Um, I don't really know why some people can be delivered and some people cannot.
Mhm.
Um, but I was always trying to give it my best shot. The thing is that as I got older, and I learned a lot about these things because God would direct me to books that talked about these things. So I would read different books, and I never did read a book on Brujeria.
Mhm.
That was bizarre because, well, there weren't any books written in English, and I did not speak Spanish very well. And I tried learning Spanish in school, but for whatever reason, I just didn't have the ability to pick it up.
Mhm.
I'd have enough words to be, you know, slightly conversational, but that was about it. And I mean, mostly, just a smattering of words. So it wasn't really that that helped me. Um, when I first really got involved with the Latin American um, uh, magic, it was more by just study and and learning. But I knew that at some point, every time God would have me learn something, I knew I'd end up having to use it.
Mhm.
And so, I had learned a lot about Santeria. I had learned a lot about Palo Mayombe, although God kind of stopped me there. He would have me read certain things, but I would I would just be reading along, and all of a sudden it would just be like, stop, close the book, you know, and bless the book with holy oil and put it away.
Wow.
And yeah, so there were times where God just stopped me because there was too much revealed or whatever, and He didn't want that in the back of my mind.
Mhm.
Um, so whenever I would get involved in a situation, God would bring that knowledge back to me that I would need, and so I would just go forward with that. Because the thing about it is that God just knows everything. So I just listened to him and did what he told me to do. And
Right.
it always worked out. It always helped. It always stopped everything. It always cleared everything. And these people would be able to go on with their lives. It would heal things and heal them and different things. So, you know, my first real introduction, of course, to Brujaria was when I went down to Juarez, and that was in my book.
Mhm.
Um, Quite frankly, I was not very knowledgeable about that at all. But I knew that God would he would tell me what to do. I knew he wanted me to go. And the reason I knew that is because this minister that called me up and said, "Can you come down and help me?" I was going to say, "Oh, are you kidding? No, I don't know anything about this." And I opened my mouth and said, "Yeah, I'll come." And then I just wrapped my hand over my mouth. I'm like, "What did I just say?"
Oh, wow.
How am I gonna go down there? I don't know squiddly squat, about all this deep, dark magic that is, Hispanic. And
Yeah.
so, I was, to tell you the truth, my see, whenever I'm working, I just my body, mind, and soul just go into the heart of Christ, and I just let God take over.
Mhm.
Um, so, you know, I have to do that because personally, I was scared out of my head. I mean, quite frankly, I had no idea um, what I was going to do or how I was going to do it, really, except that God had me write notes and notes and notes and notes for 2 weeks before I went. So I
Mhm.
had written down these different Bible verses. I had written down all these notes that God would tell me. He'd tell me what was going to happen down there, what was going on down there, all of this stuff. And I was shocked. And so anyway, when I got there, um, I told the family what was going on. I told them, and they were just, I mean, gobsmacked because I was telling them stuff that they hadn't told anybody. Nobody knew it. Nobody had said anything about any of this. I mean, I knew intimate secrets. I knew intimate knowledge, things that God had let me know that were, they weren't like somebody that's possessed knowing stuff. I was totally in my right mind, and
Mhm.
I literally opened my angel books, and that's one of my notebooks, and I wrote all this stuff, and I just showed him what I wrote, and I said, "This is all written weeks ago," and a good friend of mine, and like I said, I wasn't psychic at all, but I had a very good friend of mine. Her name is Maria Garul, and she asked me to come over to see her. She was a Peruvian shaman, although she was originally from New Mexico. And she gave me a reading before I went down there. And I had never had a reading before in my life. But I
Mm.
went to her and listened. And while I was there, the Blessed Mother literally showed up behind me. The room just got incredibly bright. Maria was just sitting there with her eyes really, I mean, wide open and just staring. And she said, "The Blessed Mother's standing right behind you,"
Mm.
and I could feel her hands on my shoulder. And I said, "Yes, I know." And she said, "Oh, you should just go down there. God's going to take care of you for all this stuff." And I'm just like, "Well, okay." I mean, seriously, you could have knocked me over with a feather most of my life. I mean, the things that God was doing, the power, the beauty, the love of it, just his kindness and mercy and tenderness with people. You know, um, a lot of people think he's a old guy with a beard sitting on a throne and meting out justice, and um, you know, um, people are scared of Judgment Day and all this kind of stuff. But the truth
Mm.
is, he really loves us, and
Mhm.
so he's like Saint Teresa of Avila said, "With God, mercy triumphs over justice." And
Mhm.
that's very, very true, and I've seen that happen more than once. So, the whole thing about Santa Muerte came up later after I got back several years, and I started to hear about it. And I had actually some people that had called me after hearing about my work in Juarez, and they said, can you come over and help us through our home? And you know, I I said sure.
Mhm.
Not having a clue what I was getting into, and then I'd get over there, but between me and that phone call and a day or two later, when I'd get over to their house, God had already versed me on Santa Muerte and all this stuff.
Mhm.
And I'd come in, and what I didn't know was that a lot of these families had cartel members in their families,
Mm.
and a lot of the cartel guys I just adored Santa Muerte,
Mhm.
and they counted on her for protection and all of this. But sometimes it went to the dark side, and they found themselves in a position that just scared them half to death. And you know, Santa Muerte used to. I think what was happening a lot was the fact that some of the things they had done kind of opened them to demonic entities.
Mhm.
And so what would happen is that instead of them feeling safe and secure, they started seeing, you know, Santa Muerte appear to them as a demonic entity and different things like that. Um, the church does not believe in Santa Muerte at all.
Mhm.
Um, but a lot of people do. So, I had to be very, very careful because, you know, I'm dealing with people and their personal faith and their personal beliefs and their culture and all of these things. And, I don't just go marching in there and tell them this and that and the other thing. And like I'm not a preacher, and I'm not somebody that is, I'm not a aggressive person. I'm assertive when I'm working for sure, but that's a lot of God. Um, but you know, I want to show people the love of God, not I'm not going to judge them and scold them and get on their case about stuff. And I had nothing to say at all about. Like I said, I didn't even know that they were into cartel or anything else. But the thing is, they treated me very well. They were very gracious and and very sweet to me. Um, and I would clear their home with holy water and exercise salt and exercised oil and exercised water. And I would bless their home, and I would do a home blessing for them, and sometimes a exorcism of their home. Um, and my priest would always give me he would give me the permission to do that. So I would go in there and do that, and a lot of times it just completely cleared up. But if they were dragged into even more evil later on, all of that stuff would come back. And
Mm.
it came back with a vengeance.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that.
Yeah. So, I mean, yes, there are a lot of rituals, but one thing people need to understand is that God created everything. God is
Mhm.
the author of rituals. So, he is the originator of ritual. So the ritual, of course, that God created was the ritual of, you know, the candles and the prayers, the even building altars, sanctifying to God, and you know, sacrificing a lamb or whatever that the Hebrews did. All of this stuff. These are all rituals. The where things kind of got turned around a little bit was that the devil saw that God was using rituals, and so he would work through people that followed him to also do rituals. So the thing is that whatever ritual the devil puts together, God can destroy,
Mhm.
or he can change it, or he can lighten it, or whatever, if he chooses to do so. Um, if there's no repentance there, or there's no uh, penitent people or whatever involved in whatever, he may not act at all, you know. And there were times where I literally had to tell people, no, I can't come. Um, or they would email me and I'd have to write back to them and I'd say, well, what you're asking is just not in my purview, because God would warn me off. He would tell me, no, it's a trap, or no,
Mm.
you can't help this person. This person is mentally ill, or this person is, just not, we can't help that person. Um, but there were people that I really tried to help, some for many years, and it just they did get help, but not completely free like they wanted. Um, and I was not, and even though I would refer them to exorcists and everything else, if what I did not help them, they still couldn't be freed. Even exorcism after exorcism after exorcism, it didn't matter. Um, so it's like, I don't know if this is in the Bible somewhere or not, but my husband always tells me you can't save everybody, you know?
No, you can't. If exorcisms fail or intervention of that sort fails, then there's a reason for it, and you just have to leave it to God, I would imagine, because you can't, no matter what you do. And then sometimes I would think it involves something in the person that you're dealing with or the people. Some people like when they do magic and stuff like that, or they get involved in it and it really does start to work, they then they get
Yeah.
scared. Then they say, something inside them wants to hold on to being able to whatever it was, to influence, to affect through magic. There's always, if there's any hesitation. But then some, like from what you're telling me and what I know about these types of magic, are just too far gone. They're carrying souls that are they're just going to be shredded up once they're dead, and that soul can't return to Christ. It can't return to the Creator. So, because some of this stuff is horrible, especially in the Palo and in the Santa Muerte cult as
Oh,
well.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's the Nganga pot where you continue to add
Yeah.
bones to it,
Mm.
bones and chains and the things that go into it of your enemies.
Herb. Yeah.
Uh,
Mm.
I
Blood.
can,
Mm.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and I
Yeah. There's a
go ahead.
problem. There's just a real problem with that. Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
there's only two kinds of power, really. As human beings, we honestly have no power.
right.
We just exist here and we make our choices, and everybody has the right to make their choices. And if they want to choose following the devil, then there's going to be a toll for that later. Um, but if they choose to follow God and something tries to pull them away from God, um, then God is more able to free them. But if they have already made a deal with the devil, or maybe made a deal with him because they wanted to save somebody and they didn't, maybe they prayed and prayed and prayed and God didn't save that person, and they get mad at God, and sometimes they'll go to the dark side instead, because they think that, well, yeah, Satan's very generous with his power. He's very generous with it. So, you know, some people get really sidetracked by that, and they get impressed by that,
Hmm.
and they feel that, people that are following God are just nuts. They're just, you know, they they just look down on us and they think, well, God couldn't help me. He didn't help me when I needed his help. So therefore, I'm going to go to Santa Muerte or to this magic. But any magic, any true magic, comes from the work of the demons and Satan.
Oh, yeah.
So you know, uh, not holistic magic like Wiccan, the lighter Wiccan stuff where you're
Mm,
healing and doing things like that. Um, although they can, how people always say marijuana is a gateway drug. Well,
mhm.
sometimes Wicca can be too, but
Yeah.
it depends on the person. It depends on, you know, are they doing things out of love? Are they doing things to heal the earth? Are they doing things to help animals and trees and things like that? Are they doing what you'd call kind of soft spells, so to speak, um, because they believe that they work? And and maybe they do. I've seen, I've met quite a few Wiccans, and I'm friends with them. Um, I have, you know, I've had I've had people that are very strictly God orientated um, get really mad at me when I say that. And they say, "Well, how can you can't be a friends with a witch?" Well, excuse me, but there's just different types of classifications, and they want to put everybody that does any kind of magic under the name witch, and
Mhm,
that's just not true. you know they can be very much into more healing and things like that, and over time they'll either get stronger into the godly way of doing things, or the love, that the power of God is in his love. And so if they just really love everything, even if they don't really understand God or know God or haven't really become a Christian or whatever, it doesn't cut them off from God. If they're doing things out of love and out of concern and care for other things, and they're not selfish, they're not self-orientated, they're not self-absorbed, they're not into power, um, searching for power. A lot of people get drawn into witchcraft because they feel like they're out of control of their circumstances.
mhm.
So those are the people that usually start looking through witchcraft books and, what can I do to do this and what can I do to do that and do a spell or whatever.
Right.
And there's movies that make that very attractive, like Practical Magic,
Mhm.
um, which, you know, starts off, fairly lovingly, and then all of a sudden there's this really dark part of the movie that,
Yeah.
that they end up having to deal with that just really throws them off their center.
The Craft, the
Yeah, it's
movie The Craft
oh, yeah.
was
Yes.
like
Oh
that.
yeah. Truly. Yeah, truly. That's the thing. I mean, you know, witchcraft and all that is very it's something that a lot of people get just drawn into, just like Harry Potter. I mean, Harry
Mm.
Potter, they're just books, right? And they're about a fictional situation. But I can't tell you how many people bought wands. you know, they bought wands and they started, you know, reading up on these curses or trying to use their wand to curse people or to do other things and this and that and the other thing. But
Yeah.
usually it was, yeah, usually it was somebody that was felt out of control of their circumstances. So they wanted the power to change their circumstances or change their life or change somebody else's life
Mhm.
against their will or knowledge even or whatever. And that's kind of where they start kind of getting off track, you know. Um, and so I've been called in to help a lot of different people like that. But you get a lot of people too that they'll call me and they'll say, "Well, my daughter's into listening to all this heavy metal and this and that and the other thing, and she's wearing all these dark clothes and she's going gothic and she's doing all this stuff and is she possessed, And no, actually, she's not, you know, but she's trying to fit in. She's trying to find a way to fit in. Maybe she didn't fit into the, popular clique, or maybe she has a low self-worth or whatever. So she kind of went to that side and started dressing that way and things like that to fit in. And if she kind of um, breaks with that a little later, or she doesn't really get so enamored that that becomes her full life,
Mhm.
um, she can step right out of it and become a completely ordinary person that has a husband and family, and is very happy, and um, changes everything about herself. But um, there's just different situations. And that happens a lot with the cartel guys too, because they're so dark and they're so into, you know, a lot of them are forced into violence.
Mhm.
And once they get forced into it, they start getting used to it and then just can't pull away from it, or maybe trying to pull away from it would get them killed. So
Yeah.
their families get threatened, all kinds of different things. And uh, so, I mean, it's really no different than the Cosa Nostra. Um, organized crime is organized crime. So, it's just it's a dark hole that people start to slip into, and when they really start to slip into it too much, um, they may not do rituals themselves, but they may go to people that do rituals for them.
Mhm.
You know, if you go down to Brownsville, Texas, there's probably two or three brujarias or brujas that work either side of the street going down Main Street. There's a lot of herbal shops and stuff like that, and they have everything from voodoo and hoodoo to brujeria to practitioners of Apollo Mambe to um, just the South American magic group and things, Mogambo, different things
Mhm.
like that. So yeah, you can, it's all about what choices that person makes for themselves.
Right.
And sometimes people are just pushed into it because it started too young, they didn't know any better. Um, but pure out and out Satanists, um, they're usually dragged into it from a very early age, or they were given to Satan when they were born, or whatever. I mean, you know, I never met Anton LaVey in person, but there was one of the first psychic lines that was ever on radio or on advertised was 976 Live. And the owners of that called me and asked me if I would come down and help them, because they were they had batteries blowing up in the in the parking lot. Um, People would come to work, put their keys in their pocket, go to work, and there were a lot of different people. They had shamans, they had Wiccans, they had just regular psychics and all kinds of different things. And but most of these people were really sweet. They weren't Satanists or anything. They were just really nice people, and they really wanted to help people. Of course, they made money at the same time, but not that much, like 35 cents an hour, I think it was.
Mhm.
But they asked me to come down and help them clear their building because there were so many problems. Because people would get up to go home and their keys were locked in their car, and they knew they put them in their pocket before they left.
Mhm.
So all kinds of crazy stuff like that. So I went down there and again used the holy water and the salt and oil and stuff and cleared their building. But yeah, I mean, Kenny Kingston called me up and he asked me if I'd work for his line, and I said no. And he said, what I need you to do is work for the line and see who's bleeding off the energy and stuff like this, because we're having a real problem with it. Um, and so So I said, well, okay, but I would tell people right up front when they'd call me, I'd say, look, I'm not psychic. I don't read tarot cards. I don't do any of that. If you have a question, if God wants to answer it, he'll answer it. But I said, I can't. Personally, I couldn't tell you squat. I'll just have to, I'll wait on God. I'll pray about it. But I did realize that there was somebody, you know, pulling energy from the line. And later on, um, I did that just for a few months. And then I talked to him again and I said, you know, I know this sounds outlandish, but I said, if I didn't know better, I'd say somebody's trying to use the energy off your line to power a psychic generator. And, the only place that anybody had heard of psychic generators was in the book about the psychics that worked for the Soviets, right?
Mhm.
And, and sure enough, later on, uh, the lady that was the head of the place at the time, she called me up and she said, yeah, we found out that that's exactly what was happening. So anyway, he closed down the line. He took his name off the line and stopped. But I don't know. It's just it's a very complicated line of work, and it takes absolutely years and years and years to really learn it. And because you can't really learn it without God. Um,
Mhm.
unless you get involved in the dark side yourself, and then, well, you're way past demonology, then you're sunk. You know, you know. I mean, you really are. I mean, I don't. No. Anytime I feel myself drawn by something, I know it's a demon trying to trick me,
Yeah.
trying to pull my strings, and they'll work through other people. You know, uh,
Oh, yeah,
you know,
definitely. They work through others.
oh yeah, they try to engender pride, in what I'm doing. But I can tell you honestly, my human self is scared to death about what I do. If it wasn't for God, I would never do any of it. So
Yeah.
I just do what He asks me to do. But believe you me, man, I protect myself. I anoint myself. I wear a rosary that's anointed and protected and everything. I mean, I take all kinds of safety measures before I even step into any place or even talk to a client on the phone.
Too many people don't do that, even in the simplest of cases. For instance, Bernadine. When you're doing investigations and stuff like that, there's always somebody who doesn't take it seriously, or you just want to be protected. I know, Bernadine, you start with a prayer and protect yourself, right, when you're going into investigations.
Yes, we actually do that before we enter the home or business or whatever, wherever we're gonna go
Oh, yeah.
in. We say our prayer, and as a group, as a team. And then when we go inside, sometimes the client doesn't want to be in the prayer for whatever their reasons are. We don't question them, but if they don't, we still do. We're going to do it
Mm.
before we get started. We say our prayer and close it
Well,
out,
yeah.
asking,
And remember to bless your
for none
car
to
too.
follow us home.
Yeah.
Yeah. Remember to bless your car, okay?
Hmm.
I've got DIY instructions up on my website, on getridofghosts.com, and it says DIY instructions. And I tell you on there how to bless your phone, your car, your everything about you. Just how to. And there's
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
yeah, because then I have a thing on there too where you can download a PDF or whatever. It tells you how to anoint yourself, because you don't just anoint your forehead or do the sign of the cross. You anoint your forehead, the top of your head, the back of your neck, where it meets in where the skull meets the neck, because that is a favorite place for demons to try to. They'll try to come in your lower spine or your navel. You have to anoint those two, your sternum, and then your throat, and then you anoint your lips, your eyelids, your nose, your ears, because that way you can see clearly, you can smell what's really there, you can hear clearly. It protects all of those senses, and it keeps your chakras covered, with holy oil, the exorcised oil. You make the sign of the cross on yourself in each of these places that I name on there, because that keeps you from getting from demons making a nest in you. Because, like, if you touch something that a possessed person has touched, and you're not wearing gloves, or you're not using holy oil, anointed oil, or exorcised oil on your hands, they can actually start a nest in your hands. Um, a good friend of mine, another radio show host, um, had that problem, and his show was the first one that I ever did. And I told him, I said, it was Dave Schrader, and I told him, I said, look, I heard you on Coast to Coast, and God showed me that you have a problem. You touched something, and it's causing wounds in your hands. And he had never told anybody. He'd never said anything to anybody. But I told him, I said, it's causing wounds in your hands. And he had like deep lines across and from the top down and then across his hands, where it was like cracking open. And so I sent him and Tim Dennis both some exorcised oil and salt and blessed items and things like that for them to wear, because at the time they were both suffering problems. So he was absolutely shocked that I knew that I could tell him that. And like I said, I'm not psychic. And but it was so true. It was absolutely 100% true. And he called John Zaffis after the radio show, and he said, "Oh, she's 100% real." He said, because he had never told anybody about that. But
Wow.
you really need to do that. If you wear gloves or whatever, take oil and put the oil over the palms and back of your hands and stuff of the gloves, so that when you touch things in a house, like if there's a cursed object or whatever, that when you touch it, you're not going to get anything on you, like leftover demon stuff. Um, but if there's nobody there that's possessed, and if you actually know they're not possessed, then usually just anointing yourself all over will do the trick. But yeah, when you anoint yourself, I even have you do both hands and both feet. So, but I can't tell you how many times that saved my life. I mean,
Dave Schrader used to be a big skeptic. Way back, well, back in the day, back several years ago. But he had something happen to him because I saw on one of the paranormal TV shows they did a reenactment of something that happened to him. But he was mostly a skeptic. He didn't believe in any of this.
well, see, that's the greatest trick Satan has. Convince people you don't exist. Convince people that evil doesn't exist. Convince people that demons don't leave traces. Convince people that none of this is newsworthy. So they just they list they you know they can listen to somebody like me for 10 hours, and they're still gonna if they're even open at all to looking at what the devil's offering, they may still go that way and not realize that they're in mortal danger. Um sometimes you just can't convince people. It's just like, somebody's saying that the volcano is going to erupt, so you need to get out of there and evacuate, and they don't, you know.
Mhm.
Um, you know, so or a hurricane's coming, you need to go somewhere else, you need to get out of there or whatever, and sometimes they won't, and sometimes they simply can't. And
Yeah. We're familiar with that one down here.
you betcha, yeah. Yeah, New Orleans was a real absolutely typical case there. But
It
I
usually
was reared.
is. It doesn't
Yeah.
happen. It usually is. Uh, because well, I think I'd rather have hurricanes than the volcano or the earthquake or something like that. Because the hurricanes, you have notice. Like they say it's coming, and you have time to get away. Earthquake or a landslide or I don't know, a tornado, which we do have, but not as frequently like as the Midwest does. But you just can't do anything about it. It's just going to happen. But you
Oh,
get
yeah.
you get 2 or 3 days to get out of there, or prepare or something when it's a hurricane because it's coming. It's
Mhm.
coming, but it ain't here yet. So
What I feel sorry for are the people that are disabled or they live by themselves and maybe they don't have a car, maybe they're, you know, one step away from true poverty and they can't afford a bus ticket. They don't know where to go and they go to the nearest shelter and then that shelter just like the football stadium there in New
mhm.
Orleans got nailed. It was just terrible.
Well,
And
they learn that's literally textbook what happened in Katrina, because
exactly.
the mayor the mayor didn't
Mhm.
call an evacuation until it was really too late for those people. They
Yeah.
he Well, in typical of, urban cities of today, they had no preparation whatsoever. For instance, people they went to the Superdome, but a lot of people couldn't get to the Superdome because it began to flood. A lot of them ended up at the convention center, which was not a shelter at all, but it was just a place on the river. And a lot of people died there,
Yeah.
basically because nobody knew they
Mhm.
were there for a while until National Guard came through with a bunch of National Guard on a bus that were heading for the
Yep.
Superdome. Yeah, and they realized that there were people down at the convention center. And one of the things that flooded badly was the whole, like the lot where they keep all of the Orleans Parish school buses. All the buses were in the
Yeah.
lot and they were flooded out. And those were the buses that should have been used to go get those people. So I guess the moral is get out of the city. Just take it on yourself to get to get as far away from it as possible. Don't wait for them to help you because they're not going to. That's how we got so many dead and so many bodies that they
Yeah.
found. Afterward is people just like that who couldn't help themselves. One of the
Well,
very was
and then you hear a lot of self-righteous Christians say that, New Orleans brought them on themselves because they had so much voodoo.
oh, for God's sake,
I
yeah.
mean, that was absolutely uncalled for.
Well, it's
You know,
ridiculous too because it gives too much power to it.
well,
That's not
exactly.
what happened,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah,
I mean,
and the thing
if
is
that's
like,
the case, ideally we shouldn't be here because they've been practicing voodoo down there since the founding of the city. So I mean, if that was a truism, then New Orleans wouldn't exist, right?
no, no, and the thing is like, a lot of people never made any kind of choice towards that type of thing. You know, they a lot of the old people in the Ninth Ward there died in those nursing homes and things because they didn't
Hmm.
bother to evacuate them in time. Who knew the levees were gonna burst? Nobody. I
Right.
mean, who knew they'd come down? I mean, you guys had weathered storm after storm before, and they didn't. And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden, this particular time, bam, it went down. But, that wasn't caused by evil. That was just simply
Yep. Human
nature.
incompetence and nature, yeah, because
Mhm.
all the money that was supposed to go to the reinforcement of the levees over the years had been given to the city, but they had either pocketed it or they gave it to other projects that that they had their friends on. It's Banana Republic. It always has been Louisiana politics and stuff. But that's what happened. Those levies should have been reinforced with money that was given to them, federal money that they just
Yeah.
distributed, put in their pocket, put in the freezer, $90,000 here, this there. And then it happened, and then they want to say, oh, people blew up the levees and all this other stuff. No, it's your complete, total
It
incompetence
can be
and
true.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, that's saying
Well,
that God punishes everybody just because a few people are doing something, and that's not true, because we wouldn't exist. There's so much voodoo down there. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but we wouldn't exist if that was, and that's really giving it too much power. Because Christ turned that thing at the last minute. It did its damage, but it would have been a hell of a lot worse if it hadn't took that little jog and went to Mississippi. New Orleans
oh, yeah.
wouldn't be. It would have destroyed us all. So,
Yeah. That's the thing. I mean, the thing is that, um, you know, in, in the demonology work that I do, you know, if people are attracted to the evil or they're attracted to the dark power or whatever power they are seeking, and if they don't think that God is giving them that power, because, they might pray for it, but, God doesn't usually give people individual power. You know, I mean, I couldn't work a spell if I wanted to, which I don't. But the thing is, it's just anytime that any ritual I've ever done has come right to me from God,
mhm,
and it's been an uplifting thing. It's something that it heals people, it heals the land, it heals the buildings, it does whatever. But a lot of times, like when we got down there in Juarez, we called up, we were really getting drastic, feeling, very drastic because we got done clearing that big, huge 10,000 square foot clinic. And the next thing we knew that we had to get a priest to bless it. Otherwise, all those spirits would come right back into the building. We were just, we were, Todd and I were practically hysterical because nobody could reach the priest because they have radio fluids down there, right?
mhm,
And nobody could take time off to drive 30 miles because, if you could have driven just right, where their canals were, their irrigation canals, if you could have driven across there, you could have been in town within 3 to 5 minutes. But they had to go clear around to get to Via Hamata. So, we were unable to reach the priest or anything. And then all of a sudden, at the very last minute that day, this car drives up, and the man who channeled the Saint Nudity Finenzio was driving. Todd and I didn't know that, but we'd never met him. But Todd had candles lit for Saint Nudity Finenzio as well as Saint Michael and Saint Gabriel and Mary and Jesus and Sacred Heart and everything. The thing is that he drove up and he had the priest with him and the Mother Superior, and she had brought the robes for the priest. Now, had we been able to contact him, we would have said, you need to, bring your robes so that you can, you know, uh, bless the clinic. But we couldn't reach him. So when the guy who channeled Saint Nita de Finenzio, he just he just was watching TV, and all of a sudden he felt like God wanted him to take the priest out there. So he went to the priest and he said, Father Miguel, he said, do you want to see St. Francisco's clinic? And the priest said, yeah, I've never been there. I've never been there. And the Mother Superior, he said, well, bring his robes, you know. And so um, they came out there. So here he was. He had his robes. There was the priest. There was the Mother Superior. And there was the Saint Nudity Finenzio man who was channeling him. And the family, just when they heard that they were there, they just came running from the hacienda to the clinic. And, Esperanza, Francisco's sister, she was in her 80s and she was even running. I mean, they were all running. And so there were quite a few people there. Um, Todd and I were absolutely stunned. We'd been praying and praying and everything. And all of a sudden, this car drives up, and Todd was just taking the last bag full of these cleared masks um, off the property, putting them in the field. And the driveway was right there by the field. And so when he saw the car drive up, um, he was standing out there and then he's like yelling, Sonia, Sonia, the priest is here, the priest is here. And both of us, we knew that was a miracle. We had no doubt in our minds that it was a miracle. And so the priest came in and he blessed everything and all this. And, and we never knew who the man was that brought him, although we did greet him and, he only spoke Spanish. And so we just greeted him and thanked him for coming. Um, and after they left, we were sitting down on the portico with Maria Teresa. She had been interpreting for us the whole time, and she was a really good friend of the family. And Todd said, "Who was the guy that drove the priest out?" And she just looked at us like, "What?" She goes, "You didn't know?" And Todd goes, "No." He said, "I, could you just tell us who it was?" And she goes, "Well, that's the man who channels Saint Nina di Fidenzio." And we were we were just gobsmacked. You could have blown us over in our chairs. I mean, we were shocked right to our core. And then she told us what he had told her, that he had felt that he needed to go over and get the priest to bring him out there. So, God is capable of doing so many things that we don't even see coming. Um, but, we knew we had to get that place blessed. And God had put that thought in our heads very strongly at the end there when we had finally gotten all these masks and horrible things out of there and blessed the entire place with, oil, exorcised oil. We'd sealed everything the
Mhm.
best we could, but we knew we needed a priest to reconsecrate because he had a chapel to St. Michael there, and then the clinic itself needed to be blessed. And so God just sent the priest. He just took it in his own hands and sent the priest. And we were just I'll tell you what, I mean, we were we were we were so stunned that I don't think Todd or I either even got over it. We did the rest of the homes and stuff in Juarez and whatever.
Mhm.
We even fought the devil before we left there because he was perfectly possessing this other brujo.
Mm.
Um, and we both got wounded. And 2 years later, we and basically just within a day or two of each other, Todd got really sick. Um, he went in the hospital, and I got really sick. I had blood in my mouth, and my husband just literally carried me to the car and put me to the emergency room. So I had an ulcer perforate. It was just a centimeter or two away from my aorta and my stomach.
Oh, geez.
Um, yeah, Todd had a sinus infection, and this man that he knew was angry because he was going to leave Santa Fe and come up to our house in Colorado Springs, and he hit Todd in the ear, and it broke his eardrum, and this sinus infection went into his brain, and at 2 o'clock in the morning they had to pull the plug because he had um, oh, what do you call it? When your brain gets all infected,
Yeah.
Um, so he was brain dead by 2 o'clock in the morning. So they pulled the plug, his family. Um, so just it was just a miracle that I lived
Wow.
too, because I could have died as well.
Mhm.
And nobody told me. It was right at Thanksgiving time. Nobody told me that Todd had passed away. He passed away on December 2nd. And nobody told me that until I got out of the hospital and came home.
Mm.
And then I was, because they didn't want to tell me because they
Yeah.
knew how close we were, but yeah, and that was like almost within a day or so of each other that we ended up in the hospital. But you know, God is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, I have seen God work things that are just mind-boggling, and I'm always in awe of God because he just does the most incredible. He works the most incredible works, and you know, uh, it's just once you see him in action, and like when I'm working, like I said, I go into the heart of Christ, but my body is, just it's just God is just like over the top of me, not possessing me or anything like that, but just over the top of me, and I'll come in there and I have no fear whatsoever. My working self, it's just completely straightforward, logical, just get the job done, do the thing, but inside myself, I've walked into a house before and had somebody go into full possession
Mm.
just like that. And the rest of the people in the house came running out screaming, and I'm walking in, and I've got exercise salt water in my spray guns, and I'm pulling them out of my pack, going in there like quick draw McGraw, and spraying everything. I sprayed her. She was floating within a few feet of the ceiling.
Oh,
And
no.
yeah, I just came in there and I
Or
started praying the Hail Mary and Our Father and everything. And she just started to float back down to the bed. And then she got back on the bed. She opened her eyes and she goes, "Oh, that feels so good." It was, I mean, honestly,
Can you do
you
that again?
I mean, no, really, I didn't want to see her do that again. But the team member that was with me, he was absolutely shocked to his toes because he'd never seen anything like that before. Quite frankly, I'd never seen anybody levitate before either. But fortunately, she wasn't up running around violent or something like that instead. But still,
I don't know.
um,
I don't know, Sonia.
I'm telling you,
I don't know
I
what I
mean,
would prefer. I don't know if I'd rather her running around or floating in the air. I mean, I
I'd
don't know.
rather have her floating in the air. You know, trust me. I've walked into houses before and had things flying at me out of the, you know,
Mm.
just the, you know, knickknacks, you know, furniture. I mean, everything just flying at me, and I'm standing there with my spray guns, and they're big spray bottles, so they last a while. And I had one in each hand, and I'm spraying the stuff as it's coming, and just drop right out of the sky, just boom, right, on the floor, and I just had to keep turning in circles to make sure it didn't hit me in the back. And yeah,
Well, I
and
believe you. I believe you. It's just kind of funny. Just
I know it is. I mean, because I walked out of that house that day. I remember, and all these things were on the floor, and some had broken, whatever, and um, one of my team members had stopped at the door because he didn't have a spray bottle with him, and he just stood there. He was looking through the screen door and watching this happen, and he's like, "Ooh, ah, you know, you know, and I was thinking that I really was, but the other part of me was just like, "No many Padre Fili Spiritus Sancti," and I'm spraying and spraying and spraying and spraying, and it was incredible. And then, of course, when the owners came in, they're like, "Wow." Because their furniture was moved, everything was thrown around, and they came in there, they just went, "Wow, I guess they didn't like you very much." And I'm like, "Nope." You know? But, yeah, we finished clearing the house and nothing happened after that. It was completely free, but I'll tell you what.
that's amazing.
yeah,
Dean,
Sonia, I've seen a lot of things in my life, but if I've seen a person levitating to the ceiling, I gotta have to rethink my mental quote. Be like, I would
I,
call
I,
Eileen like I did before, like, what the heck? What
You're
do I
on your own
do?
with that.
Yeah.
No, holy water and salt, blessed salt and stuff. And vinegar, you start throwing that at them and stuff. Just throw a cat.
no, no, and no.
No, no, no.
No, it's got to be exercised oil, exercised salt, and exercised water. And that's
Right.
the only thing I know, honestly, that can stop that stuff right in its tracks.
Well, you never
It,
met my cat Moochie.
yeah, well,
She's
you know,
my she's our second line of defense. If there's going to be any kind of breaking into my house, they get past this Doberman, then I throw this cat on them, and that's it. They will go. She's she's insane, and she has these hooks for claws, and she's just so it's like throw Moochie, do any throw
really
the thing.
thinking,
No, I know I'm making light of it, but it's like no, it's like get out of there and get a priest in there, Dean. That's that's all you're gonna do because I ain't coming. I might come and watch,
yeah, from a
but Dean,
distance, right?
you got any questions? I wanted to say that what you're talking about, the case that you were talking about in with all the masks and the priest, etc., coming in, is told in your book, The Curse of El Diablo, right?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah. So the
yeah,
whole story, for listeners who want to read the whole story, it's in Sonia's book, The Curse of El Diablo, and we'll
yeah.
find out how to get it.
You can get it on Amazon. It's and I'm sure it's other places too, but it's just in Kindle. So
Hmm.
I had to take it out of the print on demand because Amazon was selling it at a much cheaper price at $3 to $4 to third party sellers, and I
Mm.
didn't see one penny of that. So I sold a lot of books. I got, I think, paid a total of $181.
Oh, geez.
And, yeah, I mean, I sold several thousand books, but I only got $181 by the time my publishers took their percentage and Amazon took their percentage. Um, you know, and
Mm.
basically they charged me tax or whatever.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I was supposed to get 70%, 70 cents on the dollar. And instead, I basically ended up with less than $1 per book.
That's not fair. I've heard a lot of people complain about Amazon doing that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're really bad about that. And the thing is, I still have people buying my book in Kindle, and I have yet to see a check from Amazon ever.
Hmm. Well, I
Nothing.
just discovered that my self-published books that I only publish on Amazon are available on Barnes and Noble, and I'm not getting anything from Barnes and Noble.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
call the lawyer time again. I've already been through the ringer with people stealing my stories and publishing them in their own books. So I've been through legal issues with that. But it's like, no, I haven't gotten a penny from Barnes and Noble, but they're selling my book and it's only available from Amazon. So, the joys of self publishing, but you really have to be careful and on top of it continuously. And that not only that, but the pirated downloads too, because they take your download or your document, and then you can just get it like a download from some random site. You could spend days just on one thing trying to track it down. So
Yeah,
so
I gave up. I just, you know what? I wrote that book for God anyway. So,
well, and then
you
he
know,
gets it there. He'll get it out there. But anybody interested in buying it, then buy the Kindle version. That way you'll get something from it. So
well,
Bernadine,
it's a teaching book, really.
yeah. Dean, do you have any questions for Sonia before we wrap it up?
No,
Nope.
I think I heard a lot.
No.
Yeah. I'm still I still have in my vision in my head the lady levitating on the ceiling.
So do I.
So I will go to
Yeah.
bed with that and say my prayers ahead of time.
I'll tell you what, that's something you just can't unsee, Brendan. You
No.
can't unsee it. I mean, the thing is that I don't. I don't judge people either. I just like, if that's their choice to be a Satanist, that's their choice. I mean, people will have the right to make their own choices. And,
Yeah.
I mean, whether we whether we approve of those or not is not really our business. God says, don't judge others, you'll be judged. And
Mhm.
so I just don't judge other people. And whether they practice brujeria or they practice, adoration to Saint Muerte or whatever, that's their business and that's what they believe and that's what they choose to believe. And like I said, I'm not an evangelist. I don't go around trying to convert people. I don't tell them what church to go to. They do get cleared. I don't tell them, you know, they know who I am. They know what I do. Some people have joined the Catholic Church after me doing things for them or whatever, but other people have just simply gone back to their own church or not church at all. Just a strong belief in God because God helped them. So, I mean, it's like, you know, it's not my duty to tell them that they need to do this or need to do that because you know yourself, the minute somebody says, well, you've got to do this and you've got to do that or blah, 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 you
Right.
know, it's threatening to people and God's love does not threaten people.
Mhm.
So I don't do that. But I did tell the people down in Juarez, I said, if you don't want things to happen to you anymore, you might want to rethink your choices about brujeria, you know.
Mhm.
And so I mean, a lot of these magic systems work for good as much as they work for evil. So or some just work for good more than they work for evil, but they do have the ability to work evil as well. But
Yeah.
again, that's their choice, I'm
Mhm.
not gonna I'm not gonna sit down there and herd them around or tell them what to do or anything else. I mean, they can make up their own minds what they choose to do.
Mhm.
So, you know, but yeah, I mean, when people call me for counseling and things like that, I don't try to change their religion or have them do things my way or whatever.
Mhm.
We'll talk about different things or whatever. And, if their child's in trouble, I'll help them to help their child. Um, if husband or wife are having problems or whatever, I'll do my best to help them. But there's only so much I can do, and if they choose to do otherwise, then that's on them.
Right.
That's you
Right.
know. So it's like all my team members, they're all chosen. They're all people that God sent to me. They all have different gifts,
Mhm.
and we work very well as a team because I'm not the star of the show here. I am basically just a person like them, and we all have our gifts from God. So I listen to every opinion they have. I listen to every single thing they say because a lot of them have a different perspective on what's going on. And a lot of times I learn things from them as much as they learn from me. So, you know, I think it's really important to work as a team, to have a team there because otherwise you tend to get yourself into you know serious trouble because when I was working by myself, oh my goodness, I used to get slapped down all the time. I mean,
Mhm.
I didn't know everything. I just all I knew is that God would either take care of it or he wouldn't.
Yeah.
And if he didn't, I just learned to skedaddle. I just got out of the way. And
Yeah.
you know
Definitely.
spent my time somewhere else because um I didn't know enough to be able to um you know I could never be a full on exorcist like Gary Thomas or some of the really like I know almost every exorcist in this country, but I'm not going to mention all their names because they like to keep that secret. But Gary Thomas is very open and above board about it, so he talks about it all the time. But it takes a special person to really take on the devil in an exorcism,
Mhm.
and I've only done that a couple of times, and believe me, I paid for it later. But at the same time, things turned around.
Yeah.
So, it's not, but I'll tell you what, I've had a lot of illnesses and I've had a lot of problems physically. Um, you know, and after whereas I had PTSD, I had to literally go to a counselor to help me get myself together. It just because I saw stuff down there that just scared me, my personal self, half to death.
Mhm.
So I just thought I got to take steps. I can't keep doing this.
Yeah. Well, that and people don't understand it. It can happen just from investigating the paranormal, from
Yep.
playing Ouija board once, or being around one, or fooling around with tarot cards, or all of that. There's always residual effects, and once you look into it, like the saying goes, when you look into the occult looks back. It sees
Yep.
you. So
It's true.
well, I'm
Mm.
glad that you've come to where you've kind of retired from it, and are enjoying your life a little better.
Oh yeah.
But
Yeah.
anyway, I hope that's the case.
It
So,
is. Mm.
so
It is.
yeah. And now you were talking earlier, we just talked about where to get your book, and you were talking about it's getridofghosts.com, where you have your basic DIYs to help get rid of ghosts and keep yourself safe, right?
Yeah, it is. And I took the donate button down because the only reason I used a donate button was just so people could send shipping money.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not shipping out uh salt and oil and stuff anymore.
Okay.
But
Well, but
yeah.
there's a ton of advice there for people who need it. So
Well, and the
so.
prayers are up there too, so they can take those prayers to their priest or their minister, you
Mhm.
know, and he can pray over it. Or I have a priest that is part of my team.
Mhm.
So, if they want a priest to pray over it, I can contact him and he'll call them and talk to them
Oh, good.
and pray over their salt and oil and stuff to make sure that it's done by by a truly ordained priest, you know.
Mhm.
Uh, so it gives it more power when it's done by a truly ordained priest than it
Right.
does if you do it yourself. You
Mhm.
can pray over it yourself, but in cases of severity, I would not. I would get a priest to pray over it. So
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight, Sonia. This has really been a great conversation, and you definitely have enough stuff for another book. You should be
yeah, I
writing.
know. I, I know people have been wanting me to write for a long time. I had a
Yeah.
quad bypass a couple of years ago, and I had a bone spur on my spine, and I didn't know it. And when I was hanging, I guess they kind of hang you when they do that, kind of over the kind of an arch.
Mhm.
And anyway, the bone spur cut into my nerve packet on my left shoulder. I'm left-handed. My last three fingers on my left hand are kind of numb. They feel like they're asleep all the time. So
Mhm.
it's hard for me to type now. So,
Well,
you
you can
know,
could dictate it. You could do an audiobook type
yeah,
thing. That would be good.
yeah, I thought about that too. I thought about putting something out in audio because, um, I'm not really shy about talking, but,
Mhm.
I just wanted to. The thing is, it costs a lot of money to do a audiobook.
Yeah.
And right now, we're kind of basically on a fixed income.
Mhm.
Yeah. But once
Well,
God will work a miracle if we're supposed to do it. So,
yeah, exactly. I mean, he's taking care of you every day. So, well,
absolutely. Yeah.
thank you so much, Sonia, and we hope that, you and your husband are doing well and continue to do well. So I know you've got God with you, so there won't be any problems there.
No. Well, thank you, Eileen. I really appreciate it. And, and both of you really, I mean, I just, we just had a great talk many years ago when we talked. And, So yeah, this is the first radio show now I've done since, well, a couple of years ago I did John Wells again. But
Well, we want to have you back in the future again, and we can talk some more about it because I think you have stories and information that people need to hear. So maybe we'll work it out in the future, and we can have
Well,
later.
she does have a show coming.
Wait, what?
She's going to be here in July.
Oh, you are okay.
She's coming back in July.
Oh,
Yes.
okay, good. I didn't know that. Oh, so that's Dean keeps the
Yes.
schedule and she tells me stuff, but I've got so much stuff. One thing pushes the thing out of the other. Oh, well, good. Well, then we'll see you next month.
Yeah.
well,
Oh,
Bernadine, thank you so much too. I really appreciate you thinking of me and
Oh,
you know having me on your show. I really appreciate that.